the key conditions for the next review is legislation establishing an independent anti-corruption court. It is adjustment of domestic gas tariffs in line with import prices. It is also to ensure that fiscal policy is consistent with program commitments. And then also a privatization law that will support open, market-based, transparent sale of government companies. And a final key condition for the next review is a pension reform that ensures that the pension system is fair and that it is sustainable.
How much progress have you seen on those conditions that you were just naming in the past few months, I would say?
We've been discussing these reforms, and we continue to discuss them. We haven't completed those discussions yet.
And how possible do you think is receiving by Ukraine the rest of the sum in the framework of the whole program by the end of 2019?
So it's very much feasible for Ukraine to complete these reviews, and when those reviews are completed, then it's possible to disperse the next tranche under the program.
Because we've heard different assessments from the Minister of Finances and also from the National Bank saying that if Ukraine doesn't receive the tranche by July, it's almost obvious that it's hard to get the whole program done by the end of 2019. How would you comment on that?
So I think that the important thing now is to focus on the next review. So it's important to focus on the reforms that is going to unlock this review, and also to focus on the overall economic policies that will ensure that the stability seen now in Ukraine following the crisis in 2014 and 15 can be preserved, that growth can accelerate, and that this growth can be sustained in the medium term.
Okay, let's get to that discussion then. The anti-corruption court. The latest letter from the IMF states that in the current form, the fund wouldn't be able to support the draft law, the president's draft law. The letter from the World Bank says that there could be some adjustments to the already existing draft law. What would you say, does Ukraine really need to create a new one and then to work on a new draft law, or this one could be adjusted in some form, in conforming the recommendations from the Venice Commissions and so on?
So let's first start with what is the crucial thing here, and that is that an independent corruption court is established, and that this court is staffed with independent judges that have impeccable integrity, and that this court is set up without any delay. Regarding the legislation, there is broad consensus that the draft legislation does not ensure this outcome. It does not meet the requirements under the IMF program and is not consistent with the Venice Commission recommendation. So what's really what's needed now is to take a step back and ensure really that the draft legislation is strengthened, so that the fight against high-level corruption can be successful.
What crucial means and what binding means. It's sort of a strong word, and it's pretty much understandable that the council should have a quota in deciding on candidates. But there is another discussion also, that creating this public council of international experts and giving them sort of power of veto of candidates questions Ukrainian sovereignty or even constitution. How would you comment on that? Do you agree with that?
The key issue here is to ensure that those who apply to be a judge on the anti-corruption court are that their application is verified to ensure that they have the right qualifications and that they have the strong integrity. Screening these candidates and doing that by an independent and trusted body is really in Ukraine's interest. It's going to help strengthen the rule of law and help in the fight against corruption.
Why exactly international experts?
I think the important thing here is to ensure that there is the selection process for judges gets the right support, and that it gets the support from an independent body and a body that is widely trusted.
Going to the other condition, guest prices. We have seen that the Ukrainian government is not so eager to take those steps quickly. But there is a certain time frame, and my question is how flexible is this adjustment, and how far, how much progress is there in discussions on the formula?
So there is an agreement under the IMF supported program that domestic gas prices should be adjusted in line with the development of import prices for gas. And it's important that that agreement is honored. It's necessary to encourage an efficient use of gas. It's also important to provide incentives for investing in gas exploration and gas production. But it's also important to adjust gas prices so that to close the possibility for someone to illegally purchase gas at a below market cost and then sell that gas at a markup to industries and pocket the difference. But it's equally important that poor and vulnerable households are protected from sharp increases in the gas price. And the existing household utility subsidy program plays exactly that role. And it currently covers more than half of the Ukrainian households.
We have been hearing that land reform is one of the crucial conditions for a long time. Why is it off table now?
We hope is that the government will finalize the legislation on the land reform that's currently under development with the support of the World Bank, and that this draft legislation will be submitted to Parliament for discussion. Land market reform is important in Ukraine to increase investments and increase the productivity in the agricultural sector. Land reform is going to enable Ukrainian agricultural land to be able to be used as a collateral when taking out bank loans. And then these bank loans can be used to invest in machinery, to install irrigation, to purchase seed and fertilizer. It is a key element of the program, and
it still is.
It
still is. We know that this year and the coming year is Ukraine will have to pay some record sums on national debt, and it means that Ukraine will probably have to turn for more foreign loans. How do you assess risks of financial meltdown, and does the IMF consider those risks in terms of cooperation with Ukraine in the framework with the program?
The IMF program also ensures that Ukraine has sufficient foreign currency reserves to service its external debt. So what's important now is that these policies and the reforms are being continued so that the economy can strengthen further.
If Ukraine doesn't get the next tranche, what happens to Ukrainian economy?
I don't want to speculate about that.
If we assess the program by now, but at this point, how much Ukraine has done under this program, and if you can measure it in percentage, in some percentage, and how much needs to be done more?
Yeah. So a lot of important reforms have taken place since 2014. The ones that I can highlight is the strengthening of the monetary policy regime, the modernization of financial policies, it's the energy sector reforms, so adjustment of domestic gas prices, and also the strengthening of the corporate governance in Naftogaz. And it's also setting up important anti-corruption institutions such as NABU and putting in place electronic asset declarations.
What are still the weakest points in Ukrainian economy? What should be a subject of main attention in Ukraine?
So growth in Ukraine has returned after the output contraction in 2014 and 15. Growth needs to accelerate, and growth also needs to be sustainable. And for this to happen, investment is needed. And when you ask investors what prevents them from placing their money in the Ukrainian economy, the answer that you get is very often a concern about property rights, the rule of law, and corruption.